Always the best.
Well, good morning. I'm here with Doug to talk about Chat4GPT or ChatGPT-4o, among other things. It's Friday, May 17, 2024. But the first thing I want to talk about is drones. China has built the world's first dedicated drone carrier. Instead of an airplane carrier, they have pictures of it from a satellite. And this seems brilliant to me. I mean, I always thought aircraft carriers are insane. You know, they have to land these planes on a runway that is too short. It's really dangerous. It's really difficult. And obviously, you could have like 10 times as many drones. And that does seem like the future of warfare. And there's also an article on Forbes talking about U.S. drone swarms. They have things called hives. They have where you can launch like up to 80 drones and have them all controlled by one operator because they all just move in a swarm. And I've seen prototypes of swarms that communicate among themselves using AI and point-to-point radio, and that might be what these are doing, so they can sort of coordinate. So this seems like obviously the cheaper, safer way to conduct war. And in response, Britain has developed a weapon to take down the drones, which is pretty amazing. It looks like a cannon, but what it has in front instead of a barrel is just a square antenna. And this makes a concentrated burst of radio energy, which they say can take down a whole swarm of drones for just 12 cents a shot. So, so this is the future, I think. We're seeing it happen in Ukraine. Ukraine is making, I think, maybe up to 1 million drones or something. It's obviously the way to fight a war. We've been thinking about like robotic robot soldiers, but these drones seem like much better. I remember one of the things I read last week about the drones is they're taking out Russian tanks with these little cheap drones because the Russian tanks have 3 hatches and the hatches weigh 200 pounds. So, what they do is they flip the hatch open and they walk out to like go sleep in the woods or something and they leave the hatch open. So the Ukrainians just drop a hand grenade in the hole and destroy the tank. And they're extremely effective. And all you need is like a cheap drone, like the kind you'd have a hobbyist here, just carrying one hand grenade. So, it's this is, I think, the wave of the future.
So, Sam, I'm wondering if this was a military application
Yeah.
or civilian application that turned military. And where we've seen these drone swarms, I think first that everybody saw was at the Olympics in
Yeah.
China, was it
Yeah.
not?
Yeah. So I go in the sky like a dot matrix and print up things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm wondering, did it have military first and come to civilian, or is this civilian going to military?
They
We
always
don't know.
they always come together.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but anyway, I think it's my whole life they've been saying we're going to have robot soldiers, so you no longer have to send our young men to die on the battlefield. And these drones, I think, are the thing that has actually done that.
Yeah.
You
Well,
just
I
have
don't know
some
if
guy sitting in a booth in Texas blowing things up far away without having to go get shot.
so. Yeah, interesting, huh?
Yeah.
So the Britain has essentially a cannon, a ground base Star
Yeah.
Wars cannon, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
that shoots something like an EMP.
Some directed burst of radio energy. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not an EMP, but
But
some.
it must be doing a phased array antenna. It's a big square antenna, but you can use software to aim that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Concentrated
you just
burst.
blast that, and I guess what they lose their orientation or
Oh,
communications.
I don't know if they explain exactly what radio wave weapon. It uses radio waves to detect, track, and disable electronic components at a range up to 1,000 meters. So,
Now, what's that for us in English? 1,000 meters,
a half a mile.
half a mile. So that's not that far.
No, but and so I don't think they directed energy weapons have taken on renewed importance. They don't explain exactly what it does. I wonder if it causes the electronics to short out or if it just interferes with the radio communication, so the drone is no longer communicating. Because if that's the case, then it's not going to stop them because that's already happening in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, Russians are already interfering with the radio signals. The Ukrainians are just making AI generated drones that target themselves without external control. So they really are the classic, automated killing machines like the Terminator.
Yeah, so I guess they could at a range of a half mile, I could conceive that it could be the equivalent of a high voltage pulse,
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
will.
And I think it's about like any other anti-aircraft weapon. And of course,
Yeah,
the whole point of drones is they have to fly pretty low to do anything. So this would probably be what
yeah,
you put around your airfield and any other target and use it to blast these drones out of the sky before they take out your stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I it I don't know about effectiveness right now, but we're in the early stages.
Oh, sure.
So
And I'm sure
yeah,
they can. The next step, of course, is to make the drones resistant to this with a layer of shielding or something, and then make them more powerful. The endless
yeah,
battle. Cops get bigger guns, so the crooks get bigger guns, so the cops get bigger guns, and on you go.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Kind of reminds me of an original Star Trek episode. I don't know if you know or if you remember this, but it was let's see, the Enterprise came upon two planets that were warring with each other,
Yeah,
and the people were walking into what was essentially an exterminator machine. And they said, why aren't you fighting the war? Why are you just killing your people? And it was computer simulated. And they said, well, if we do that, we destroy the planet. So we need a place to live, but we're at war with each other. So the computers generate the casualties.
yeah, yeah. I remember that. That was a little screwy, but sure. Yeah,
There's some logic to that. I guess I could argue, but
I would say both sides have such an incentive to just lie and cheat that the system would collapse immediately.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's what they did to come along with this destruction. And Captain Kirk's big speech was, you need to go through the horrors of war to really understand what's going on.
I remember that whole show. The prime directive was just there to be violated on all occasions.
All right. Well, since we're talking about jamming drones here, there's
Yeah.
another one here
Mhm.
that Russia, as we know, has come up, and I'm sure other countries have, of a way of jamming GPS. And just so people know, there are multiple GPS systems. The Europeans have one. In other words, America has one, Europeans have one. And I know there are other countries. I'd have to imagine China has one.
They do.
They do.
We're
They have
talking
their
about
own
this.
satellites.
Yeah, we were talking about this on Pulse Security Weekly, and that's when I brought up a Wired article about the Russians jamming GPS, and they said there are four systems, and one defense is to use all four and find out which one is lying to you.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And
then
and
you
I
have to trust the Chinese and the Russian one, which maybe you shouldn't be trusting.
so yeah, yeah, true. And they oh, where was I going with this? And we know that you can this was a James Bond fairly recent James Bond movie. We know that we can alter GPS signal to make it lie about your position.
Yes,
And
spoofing,
that
the jamming.
yeah, spoofing, thank you. Not just jamming, but spoofing.
Yeah.
And that we've seen also. So as a result of this, we need some way of reliability. And I kind of titled this "What's Old is What's New." And that is, in World War II era, we came up with LORAN, which is low frequency, long range navigation. And that was put to sleep around, I think, 1990 or late 1990s, 20, sheesh, almost 25 years ago, 25 years ago.
Hmm.
And the way this was made public is somebody has a LORAN receiver that all of a sudden woke up. And it hasn't been, I don't know if he had it on, I don't know what the story was, but all of a sudden it started receiving signals. And the way this works is it's land based, and it's for position, navigation, and timing. They call this PNT service. And essentially, it's old fashioned triangulation that you have 2 points or two radio transmitters, or I guess you could have more, but you have 2 points that are sending out a signal that you can triangulate on.
But they're ground based?
Yeah, they're ground based, so it's non satellite.
Well, that's a problem.
And it's high, low frequency, but high power.
But we'd only be able to use it near one of those ground-based stations.
Yeah, but this was long range, so you could be out in the Pacific,
Really?
right? Yeah, these signals they're low frequency.
It bounced off the ionosphere?
Yeah, they bounce off the ionosphere, and we're looking at 90 kilohertz to 110 kilohertz.
But
So very low.
if,
Pardon?
if they bounce off the ionosphere, wouldn't that distort the timing and make it so you aren't really getting an accurate reading of where you are anymore? Because the distance will depend on how high it goes in the ionosphere and stuff.
Good point. Don't know.
Yeah. Anyway,
But you're right. There's also a data band that's also sent out there. So you're right, but it depends on timing.
it would depend on the weather and such. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
a more modern solution I saw was ultra cold atoms being used to cause interference into the Berkeley waves so you can have an accelerometer that is very, very precise. Calculate
All
exactly.
right. You were talking about that. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the high-tech modern solution. What you got here is the old-fashioned solution.
Yeah. So I don't know what the range is of LORAN, but I know it's been used for, I mean, it was used since World War II. It was developed during World War II,
Yeah.
and it served us for aircraft, marine for decades after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in practice, it might be good enough.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. So they're calling this eLORAN for
Yeah.
enhanced. And let's see, it can, so it's jam proof, jam and jam and spoof proof
Yeah. Well, that's
based on the signals. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, realistically, I'm thinking if you just put it at your one at the airport, then when
Yeah.
you're hundreds of miles away from your airport, probably being within 1 mile is good enough. And when you get closer, it will get more accurate when you get to where you care.
No, the way this works is you have to have two or more,
Right.
and it's the signals are being sent out, and it's where they overlap. So
Right.
it's not direction. That would be direction finding, and you'd have to have a direction finding antenna.
Right. Well, what I mean is if you have two of them and you
Yeah.
compare them,
Oh yeah, yeah.
your accuracy would be high when you're line of sight, and it would be degraded when it bounced off the ionosphere. But when you're out in the ocean, you don't need all that accuracy.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it makes sense. Good. That may be a good way to deal with the jamming and such. Right.
Yeah, the other one that's used in radio navigation is called a VOR. And that you use a single transmitter. And if you ever flown over an airport, it kind of looks like a Mexican hat. And they have radials that go out, and your receiver in the aircraft, and this is used for air. So as you approach the antenna, it gives you a direction towards the antenna, and it gives you a to and a from, so you know when you've flown over it. So that has, they call them radials that go out. So you kind of know the direction that you're flying towards it, but you don't know that you're flying exactly over the antenna. You just know the radial that you've passed, kind of like a hemisphere. You're going from the to hemisphere to the from hemisphere when you pass over it. And the idea is that you use that with another navigation aid like a VOR or a direction finding antenna, something like that.
Yeah.
This is all World War II era,
Yeah.
right? When the aircraft we went from biplanes
Yeah.
into sophisticated high-level bombing missions that
Yeah.
you couldn't even see the target very, very well.
I remember the biplanes I read about the biplanes just like the things in Ukraine. The original biplanes didn't have weapons, so they would just drop a brick through the other guy's wing.
It's true. It's true, right?
Yeah.
And you had during World War I, you had the what do you the blimps.
Yeah.
right? Until somebody developed a weapon that could puncture one of the gas bags.
Which would be pretty easy because they were pretty
Well,
big and slow moving.
but not back then.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. I mean, it was pretty difficult to get a projectile 4,000 feet in the air, 5,000 feet.
Well, they had Big Bertha. That was World War II, right? Big babies to bomb Berlin, bomb.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was World War II.
Yeah.
We're talking World War One.
Yep. Yep. All right.
So, what you're right. Once they had a bullet, and all you needed was a bullet
Yep.
that could puncture one of the gas bags, it's
Yep.
all over.
Especially if it's full of hydrogen.
Well, yeah, yeah. And the reason the Hindenburg, the
Yeah.
famous video, is filled with hydrogen
Yeah.
is because there was a moratorium on helium.
And now we're going to have hydrogen powered cars.
Yes. What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. So I will say we could talk about hydrogen cars. There's a really good video of why hydrogen powered cars don't make any sense. And it has to do more with the logistics, not the ability. So yes, you can create a hydrogen powered car. It runs, it works, not like the stuff from the 70s where it runs off of water, which is not really true because that would be perpetual motion.
No, and I saw a bunch of articles about that again. That might have been the U.S. Sun too, saying you can just make an engine that runs off of water.
It's
There's technically hydrogen in the water, but
but the
there's no way to
cost,
removing the hydrogen from the water cost as much energy as you're going to get by burning the hydrogen. So this is garbage.
yeah, yeah. And all hydrogen for the most part today is coming from
Hydrocarbons.
the hydrocarbons, yeah, from gasoline.
Yeah.
So the problem with it is the packaging it, the storage, the compression, the transportation to your hydrogen fueling station.
Yeah.
But there are some hydrogen fueling stations out there.
Oh, Toyota, the CEO of Toyota is all for this. He thinks it's better than electricity. But
Yeah,
but it's not making it in America. They shut down most of the fueling stations in America. All the car manufacturers discovered nobody wants it. It's going nowhere. This is not economical.
I can tell you, I know where 3 hydrogen fueling stations are. One is in Emeryville, California,
Oh,
that's used for the buses. That's been around for a long time.
oh,
The second one is at just a regular gas station in Concord, California. And
hmm.
the third one is kind of interesting, is at Harrah's Ranch, which is roughly about halfway where everybody makes the pit stop when they're driving between San Francisco and LA, Kettleman City, around there.
Eh.
And they have 2 fueling stations. I wonder if anybody has used any of them.
Boy, you would really have to plan your trip to make it to one of them before you run out.
Yep, I would agree.
That's the problem. Yeah.
All right, Sam, you got one for us?
Yeah, I probably ought to get to the main one, which is ChatGPT-4o. This is their new version. They just announced it last week, and it seems like a real game changer, although I wonder if the demonstration is a little bit of a swindle. I didn't really care much about the AI voice and stuff, which other people are getting excited about. It can talk to you in a sexy female voice and you can fall in love with it. But, people have been falling in love since Elijah. That's the easiest thing to do. But
That's the text generated one, right?
well, it's voice and text now and video.
Well, no, but the original Liza was
Right.
text only on a teletype.
Originally Elijah was teletype with about 20 if statements. It only had like 20 phrases, and still people would fall in love with it. But the thing that impressed me at first, although I'm having second thoughts about it, was its ability to generate code, because they would just show it a still capture of like the game Breakout and say, code this game in Python, and it would code it in Python so you can run it with no modification and it really works. And it also did it for
Really?
Pong. But the thing that strikes me is if all you did was show it a screen capture of the game, then you didn't explain anything about what the game should do. So I think the only thing you can do is go find the Python online for those games. That's what I wonder, if it could actually write good code from like a graphic alphabetic description of what you want the code to do. But I mean, if it could really do that, then maybe it could put programmers out of a job. And it's with all the ones I've tried to write code don't really write very good code. You still need a good programmer to fix the code. But apparently this one can write page after page of good code that really runs. And that was
Hmm.
impressive to me.
So, you're right. If you show a screenshot of Pong, what are the rules?
Well, apparently it matches it somewhere and finds the rules and writes the code. But I wonder if it doesn't just find it and then find the code and then just
Yeah,
repeat the code it found somewhere.
yeah, but I think they're variations of the Pong and Breakout games. So if you show one screenshot,
Yeah.
there could be variations. I don't know. It's new technology. It's brand new. We'll
Yeah.
see where this is going, right?
Yeah. And it's not really available to everybody yet. But I mean, this does make me think that they weren't lying when they said it was going to get a lot better pretty fast. And it's going to get to the point where we're all just going to be using it without a second thought the way we use a word processor now. And we hardly remember back when you had to take a goose quill and a pot of ink to actually
Yeah,
laboriously scratch things out. I think this will be the way you do everything. And it'll
yeah,
and probably mean that coders can write, 10 times as much code. All you're going to have to do is like debug the stuff the AI generated.
yeah, yeah. Sam, I wonder, is it going to be easier to debug AI generated or just create your own code?
Well, I think it can do a lot of debugging. Like it can find security flaws in code. It can already do that to some extent.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
mean, it can do two or three, and what the rules for how to get the best results out of Gemini came out. There's like an 80-page book, and it said the best thing is get it to write small routines, just like a human. Don't tell it to write the whole game. Tell it, write a
Yeah.
little routine to
Yeah.
do this, write a little routine to do that. So, I mean, I think if you use it in the same organized way coders run, it probably would make you vastly more productive. And so maybe our students would be better advised not to learn coding and try to get a job there because that's a job that's probably on the way out,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Hollywood screenwriter, which is I think who's really worried about. Hollywood screenwriters are really getting out of another dying profession.
Yeah.
Because write an
Yeah.
action movie like the last 10 James Bond movies, I can probably just give it that and it'll probably write the whole movie for you. There's some kind of formulaic stuff like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, since any more in chat,
No,
GPT-4o. So we'll see. More to come,
very soon we're all going to have
obviously.
it. And
Yeah.
the other thing, of course, is everyone. There's also a guy that I compared it with Gemini, and Gemini is useless. He gave it trick questions like, "Here's a trick question: if I have a boat that can carry two living organisms of any size, and I'm on the one side of the river with a goat, how many trips will it take to take both me and the goat across the river?" Turns out none of the AIs can do a good job at this. The right answer is
Really?
one trip. They all get confused and try to do the 3, 4 trips back and forth. But ChatGPT is by far the best. The other ones are much more. He has a whole series of questions like that that are a little bit confusing, and AIs get them spectacularly wrong. But the new ChatGPT gets them right more than anything else. So
Interesting.
apparently, it really is by far the best. And this is what I've been saying. Microsoft is the leader in this. So you're kind of wasting your time using anybody else's AI. Microsoft has the best. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So since we're on the topic of new, Apple just released and they're shipping right now the new iPads. And they have one with an M4 chip.
Yeah.
They have a new Magic keyboard and a new Apple Pen. And
Yep.
I've heard some reviews, and people are saying not bad. And what's interesting is that Apple has the iPads that are starting at about 379 for the low end one. This is I don't know if it has the M4 chip though.
Well, I think the
So
M3 is the one at huge discount because, of course, it's been obsoleted.
yeah, so the M3, I read about that a little bit, and I'm not sure if you know, those are the bin chips. Do you know what that is?
Oh, the ones that were defective?
Yeah, so the Intel Celeron, we know
Yeah.
about this from Intel days. When they had a chip that wouldn't quite perform, they'd throw it in the reject bin, and then they'd use that and resell and call it a Celeron chip.
Well, now they got many cores, so I think if not all the cores work,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
fine if you run it with a few less cores, not quite as fast, but nothing wrong with it really.
Yeah, right. It just means that one of the cores is broken and
Yeah.
right, it's disabled or not used, however they disable that.
Sounds like a perfectly good way to have discount product.
Yeah, so I'm in the iPad market. I'll let you know.
You got one, right?
No, I do not have any of the new ones, but I
Oh,
bought one of the older ones, older new.
okay.
And I was really disappointed. It was way too heavy, and
Oh,
the keyboard didn't have the function keys. And one of the things I do with the iPad is I like it tilted up, so kind of like a student reading a book.
yeah.
And I want the function keys because I want to be able to mute, increase, decrease volume, pause video, and
Hmm.
it doesn't have any of that. Or
Hmm.
the Apple keyboard didn't.
Well, that's ridiculous.
I would agree. So they've overhauled it. The new keyboards are supposed to be much better. And the price and they do have the function keys, but the price is $349
For the keyboard?
just for the keyboard.
Well, that's
Yeah.
pretty awful.
And if you get the high end, I think the high end iPad Pro is rivaling the computer. And we're talking, if you get the 2 terabyte model with the keyboard and the pen, you're talking over $2,300 in that range.
That sounds like Apple, and supposedly it's their lightest product ever.
It's the lightest product because the M4 chip is I think 20-30% more energy efficient.
Yeah.
So iPad or Apple wants 10 hours, 12 hours of battery life. And so by having a more efficient chip, you can make the battery smaller, which makes it lighter. And what does Apple also go for? Thinness,
Right.
right? This is thinner.
Yeah.
So we'll see if it's flexing too, which is something that others complain about.
That's what I wondered when I made it so thin. It looks fragile.
Yeah, but supposedly they have reinforcement in the case. So, we'll see. Time will tell, as always.
I've been hearing for decades about these new synthetic materials that are supposed to be stronger than steel, fibers and carbon stuff.
Carbon graphite, yeah.
There ought to be some way to make a stiff but light case.
Yeah. What do they call that? Unobtainium.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll see. I'm kind of curious. My iPad is end of life battery wise. It's about $125, I believe, to get Apple to replace the battery. So once it's $125, if the new low end one is $350,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're in that range that you want to start thinking about it.
I've had this argument with my sister and other people. They say she thinks you could keep using a computer until it breaks. And I said, you can't think like that. You got to think of it like fresh fruit. It's you got to get the new one. The
Yeah,
old one is no good
yeah,
even when it's a little bit
yeah.
old, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, people come up with new apps, things like that. What's interesting about the iPad Pro is that that's high end, that's competing with their computer lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about the iPad, but I might get the MacBook Air with the M4. That sounds kind of appealing.
Yeah, so here's what the trade-off, Sam, is you go with the iPad Air,
Hmm.
you've got a fully robust operating system. Whereas with the iPad, it's a remnant from the phone. And
It
it
is.
really hasn't been updated, even though the hardware is far more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would kind of like to have the most powerful AI chip. Now I'm running AIs locally and training them locally. That's what might
Yeah,
make me move to the M4. The M1 is still working fine, but I think the M4 is really a lot faster.
yeah, yeah. And so then the question that some people brought up is Mac or Apple ever going to come up with a Mac with a touch screen? And Apple has said, "Oh no, we're never going to do that."
Well, I got the iPad if you want that.
Well, but it's not as powerful. You can't
Right.
multitask. If you close one app, it
Yeah.
may probably doesn't run in the background. on and on. And you don't get a command prompt. You don't have access to the file system,
That's right. Yeah.
right? A lot of limitations.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in a touch screen, if we take a look at Apple's history, they've been, no, we'll never do anything like that. That's a feature that people don't want. And then they release it and they say, yes, this is a feature that people have been wanting. So, or this is a
Oh,
feature
previous
we
feature.
think that people will want.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So they add the feature in. Anyway, we'll see.
Yeah.
New iPads are out there if you're in the market for one. New iPhones should be out later this year. I'm also in the market for a phone
Well, pretty soon they're supposed to have AI running locally on these devices.
on the phones, right?
Yeah, on the
Yeah.
phone, probably on the
So you
computers
might,
too.
yeah, you might hold off there. My battery is dying. I get about 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's slowly, and again, to replace the battery in the phone, I don't like going to third parties. I always go to Apple because I don't trust, third parties to deal with the Apple repair.
Well, they can do it. Anyway,
Sometimes they can. If you've got the button, they can't replace the button. You lose button functionality.
oh, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, Sam, let's go on. Move on here.
All right. Well, I got so there's a study that came out that demonstrated tree rings all over the place, and demonstrated that last summer was the hottest in 2,000 years. And something like 23 of the last 25 years have been the hottest. So the climate change is zooming up like a hockey stick, and people are getting very upset. The insurance companies are upset. It's turning out that climate change is getting worse much faster than expected. So the more pessimistic climate projections that said there might be a tipping point where everything just collapses appears to be true. We appear to have fouled up the ocean currents and the trade winds and stuff. So the fundamental, what made the predictable pattern of seasons has been broken. So it's pretty bad. And that's one of the many reasons why I really don't want to see Donald Trump get in power and increase the fossil fuel and pretend there's no climate change. It's an outrageous position to pretend there's no climate change, but that is, of course, now the standard Republican position.
Yeah. Interesting, Sam. This whole industry is what I will call it of climate denying
Yeah.
is is a real fascinating one. It actually goes back to the cigarette industry.
Yes. The cigarette industry created this manufacture of doubt. You
Yeah.
bribe scientists who are at the end of their career to burn what remains of their credibility by lying about cigarettes. And now you can do the same thing in the world of climate. But the amazing thing about Donald Trump is that he managed to stir up the worst muck of the Republican Party that they'd abandoned decades ago and raise it to the top where everybody just conformed and goes along with it, which is not what anybody expected. Richard Nixon, the other Republicans said, you can't just cheat on the election, we'll just throw you out. And when Trump just cheats on the election and lies about it, they just line up and say, yes, sir, we'll help you cheat on the election and lie about it. That's the part that's baffling. 100% of the Republicans just go along with an absolutely false and destructive agenda. And it turns out like only like 1% of them complained, and they just threw those people out. And now they have a pure party of just complete falsehood.
Yeah.
That's the strange thing, you know.
Well, what's interesting is with Watergate, if you remember way back in the 70s,
Yeah.
it's just unbelievable to me that some of those people that were working for Nixon were willing to go to prison
Well,
for the party.
I think
And
like
yeah,
everybody around Trump is, I mean, there's a cachet of the president, right? The president orders you to do something, even if it's illegal, you obey it because he's the president.
yeah, yeah.
But
Interesting.
but he didn't ask them to like promulgate a lie. In this, it's amazing. This is what Lindsey Graham said. He tried to rebel against Trump, and he said he's got some magic. People follow him. He's the only road forward, which appears to be true. He has like a Pied Piper like hypnotism over his followers, where they will just do anything for him.
Yeah. Well, we've seen what happens in history when you have somebody of that character, I guess.
Well, it'll come to a bad end, but the question is, how much
Yeah.
damage does he do before that happens?
Yeah. And the answer is in history has shown quite a bit.
It can be quite a bit. I mean, Berlusconi eventually got driven out. I mean, maybe this trial will do it. This trial over the relatively trivial issue of paying off a porn star, which is a whole lot what Bill Clinton did and a whole lot like what Nixon did. This is a relatively minor form of election fraud.
Yeah.
But maybe it'll bring him down.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, huh? Experiment and process. We're
Well,
in progress.
the whole American system is an experiment. And that's you could argue it has exceeded its shelf life. The
Yeah.
original founders said this will last about 200 years and then it'll collapse, and that seems to be where we are. Anyway,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it?
yeah,
And yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's an interesting find from scientists.
yeah.
And I'm sure we'll find that they're not credible, just like we found that the Earth is flat again. I'm sure that we'll have a group saying that, oh, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, somebody is here. Guest 365.
Oh,
All right. I wondered why I changed green. Anyway, we'll see if they speak up. Anyway, we're back to you, Doug.
yeah. So interesting. The Lockbit
Right.
ransomware gang has claimed responsibility for a disruptive cyber attack in the city of Wichita in Kansas. It's forced the city's authorities to shut down IT systems used for online bill payment, court fines, water bills, public transportation. You
Yeah.
know what city was hit? I guess a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, was Oakland.
Oh,
And the city of Oakland in California was shut down. They refused to pay the ransomware payment, which I think was kind of foolish. And the city was shut down for a month,
yeah.
except for police, fire, emergency services. But I have a friend that works in city of Oakland, and she wasn't able to work.
This is what
And
all my friends say in the work in this business. They say everybody pays.
yeah,
No matter how
well,
much you
city
might
Oakland,
argue that paying seems to be the fastest way to get stuff back up for everybody.
yeah. So for 2 months,
Yeah.
they paid employees to do nothing.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite 2 months. Slowly, they got it back up. But as they got it back up, from what I understand from my sources, they got hit again, meaning a machine that was infected came to life again and reinfected some machines that were not infected that they disinfected.
Yeah.
But Oakland's running, to the best of my knowledge, fully functional. I don't know if they had any permanent data loss. But
Of
I
course,
guess,
then there's the double extortion where then they sell the data.
yeah, right, right, right. Yeah. So city of Wichita, another victim.
Yeah. It's going everywhere.
Yeah. So, we've had hospitals, we've had police stations,
Yeah.
and cities are quite common. So
Well, I would
we'll,
think so because they tend to have more vulnerable, out of date stuff, understaffed people, less
yeah,
qualified staff, and all that.
yeah, yeah. So if you're thinking of a career in cybersecurity, you have job security, it looks like, for the
Oh, yes.
short term.
That's all my life. It's been the same. There was an XKCD about this. The thing to understand is we're all terrible at our job, so we're losing. So you keep having to hire more and more cybersecurity staff.
Yeah. So speaking of jobs, Sam, I got one.
Yeah.
This is a tech job. I thought this was interesting. It's not your typical tech job, but it's transoceanic cable repair. So there's,
Digging up from underneath the water and fixing it.
yep, yep,
Oh,
going out there, and I was surprised, but supposedly they do 20 repairs a week.
oh. What's breaking it all the time? Sharks or what?
So, I don't know. I assume anchors.
Okay.
Dragging your anchor and you're ripping it up. And I guess there's enough redundancy with these cables
Right.
now that if we lose one or two of them, it doesn't matter. We can go out there and repair them.
Yeah,
But if you like scuba diving, if you like being on a ship, there's a shortage and you could get a job. I don't know what the pay is,
probably pretty.
but I would assume it's going to be up there.
Yeah.
But it's not your typical 8 to 5 job.
I would think you would want to lift it out of the water to fix it, but I guess if you can you actually fix fiber optics underwater?
I don't know. I know there's a pretty good story about the first transatlantic cable
Yeah.
and the failures that came up with, and the cable kept breaking. They kept losing it, and they'd have to go out there with an anchor, essentially, and hook the cable, drag it up again,
Yep.
and then repair it. And eventually, I think a number of companies went bankrupt. Eventually, they got it going and it started working. Now we use fiber optics.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought
Yeah,
we used pretty well armored cables, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I don't know, but I guess if you have, a container ship
Yeah.
with an anchor, I could see that the ship would win.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense.
Or one of those big cruise ships.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What else you have for us? So
The
those are the jobs.
last one I got was some article I've been following for months. The National Institute of Standards has not been updating the National Vulnerability Database with the necessary enrichment information for a long time. And there's a good article at CSO Magazine going through this, explaining what the problem is. And one problem, basically, they're underfunded, but they also say the only problem is many people now create vast amounts of automated submissions to try to get the glory of finding more CVEs until they're getting hundreds of CVEs per day.
Yeah.
And they can't possibly keep up with it. So the CISA has stepped up to provide some enrichment, and other people have provided enrichment. And they're going to have another system where a lot of people contribute to adding this enrichment, like private companies and stuff. So they're trying to develop a new system of maintaining this database. The burden of maintaining it has just exceeded the ability of NIST, apparently.
Yeah, and yeah, I got it. So could this be a type of denial of service attack?
You could see it that way, but
Let me,
another similar
yeah,
result, by the way, which came out in Pulse Security Weekly, is the number of vulnerabilities that are ever actually exploited is only 2% of them.
yeah, I could believe that.
So in a way, we're all kind of wasting our time chasing these thousands of vulnerabilities, trying to build them into our scanners, trying to patch all these holes, which really don't matter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So maybe this reminds me of antiviruses, where you're trying to make a list of all the evil in the world and keep it updated, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's arguably an inefficient, ineffective way to get there.
yeah, I would agree. I
Well,
would
the
agree.
alternative is allow listing. And the problem is then you have to enumerate all the good stuff and keep that list up to date. And that's also hard. So
Yeah, and people want to go to places that are newly created
that's
that
right.
you have to vet, and so you've got that issue.
Yeah, and you want to write your own code. So it's just this is why they pay us the big bucks and why security is a good job, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
problem is large and we're sort of sinking and digging holes and not solving it. So we'll see. Of course, AI will
yeah.
solve everything, right? Pretty soon.
AI is going to solve everything. Absolutely. You got that one right.
One thing I remember Dark Tangent said at DEF CON, he said, I think it was Dark Tangent, he said, when we first just had Snort, we said, that's going to solve everything. It'll pick all the bad stuff off the network traffic, and we won't have to worry about security anymore. And, see how well that worked out.
How did that work out?
It got us to where we are when we have the glorious internet, and we managed to make this work. It's like we're riding a ship and it keeps springing holes and we're patching the holes enough to keep it going, sort of like our democracy. We
Yeah.
got this far by just sort of fixing it as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like we have a predetermined outcome.
No, but well, we got this far, and there's
Yeah, we
a
got
whole,
this
whole
far.
army of highly trained security professionals continuing to keep us going.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So I've got actually another job that I'll talk about for a second.
All right.
And not sure if you've been following this, Sam, but in Arizona, we're building, I believe, 3 different companies are building chip factories. Are you familiar with that?
Where Ireland, you say?
No, Arizona in
Arizona.
Phoenix.
Well, we're supposed to be developing our own ability to make chips.
Yeah, so
I thought it was
20,
years away from actually happening.
no, they're building right now. It's $20 billion or 25 billion, somewhere in that range, of new chip manufacturing plants are being built there.
Yeah, but it'll be years before they actually are producing
It'll
chips.
be, yeah, yeah, but they are hiring people, they're training people now. And one of the jobs that they have a big shortage of is welders and to do the plumbing for the exotic chemicals.
Oh,
So the stainless steel. So if you're interested and don't want to go down cybersecurity, but you're looking for a nice income, become a welder. They're training people, they're hiring people like crazy to come there. And to be a stainless steel welder, which is kind of like in the food industry, you have to demonstrate a high degree of proficiency, and it takes about 4 years to earn that certification, if you will.
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. And every shift, I thought this was kind of interesting. Every shift that you start, you have to do a sample weld that has to be analyzed by somebody on site. And then at the end of your shift, you have to also do a weld to show that you've been proficient all throughout the day, I guess
Wow.
is what that means. So, again, these are highly toxic chemicals and
Yeah,
stainless steel, exotic metals, things like that. So if you're a welder or you'd like to become a welder,
yeah.
head to Phoenix. Only problem is housing prices are skyrocketing. And people are angry. They're mad. They need affordable housing. And the people that have lived there are saying, housing prices are ridiculous.
It's just like everybody getting mad at the tech buses in San Francisco.
Exactly. Here we
Yeah,
go through this again.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is the thing. I mean, do you really want a town that's declining? I mean, where I grew up, you could get a house for free because it was in a rural area of Pennsylvania. The economy was terrible. There were no jobs at all. People were just giving up and walking away and abandoning houses. I mean, you either want a declining economy like that, or you want a booming economy where there's too much demand for houses. Those are pretty much the two choices.
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably 20 years ago during the housing crisis,
Yeah.
you could buy a 3 bedroom, 2 bath home in Houston, Texas for $25,000.
Man.
Nobody wanted them.
Well, there must have
And
been no jobs, I guess.
yeah, no jobs in the housing crisis.
Yeah.
And still to this day, you can buy a very nice 3 bedroom, 2 bedroom house for 70,000 if you'd like to live in rural parts of Texas.
Yeah. Well, and these days with remote work, you might be able to do your job at that distance.
Yeah, but yeah, if you want to live in the middle of nowhere,
Well,
that's
yeah,
what I would
right.
call it.
Well, that's why you
Rural
get more,
Texas. Yeah,
yeah, that's why you get more room because of all the bad weather. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. This is from Steve Gibson. I'm going to share this with you.
All right.
This is about pin research,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm assuming that this has come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, okay. So what this is this has to do with 4-digit pins and little history on 4-digit pins. Those came out, gosh, that had to be in the 1970s when you had an ATM card, and we haven't updated the technology. I mean, we have other technology, but we're still using this technology today. So obviously with a 4-digit pin, you have what, 10,000 numbers to choose
Right.
from. So it's a finite number. And let me kind of help you if you haven't looked at this. This is a heat graph,
Right.
and are you able to see my mouse over
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. The first two digits going down.
Yeah, so you have the first 2 digits going down here. So we start at 00 for
Mm-hmm.
the first two and we go up. And then for the second 2 digits, we go across here. And if we take a look here, there's some things that kind of stick out here, and there's some dark areas, which means that these are kind of in the single or not less than single digit
Yeah.
use numbers. Now, so the author of this says, don't go run out, start using these black ones because everybody else is going to do this. But there's some patterns that are in here, like 1, 2, 3, 4 or 4, 3, 2, 1. You can see where these are. And you can see that you've got this pattern going here, which are two pairs of numbers.
Right. Like
And
1, 1, 2, 2.
yeah, like 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Then you take a look here, and you've got why such a high 19? And
Right.
then somebody realized, oh, it's birth years.
Yeah.
And I think we're saying the same thing for the 2 0 numbers.
Yeah. So that,
So, pardon?
there are 10,000 combinations, but just like passwords, there's certain ones that are really popular, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And
Yeah, so they're not randomized, are they?
no, so there's a much higher chance than there ought to be for you to get like it right within 5 or 10 tries.
Yeah, yeah. So let me switch screens here for a moment.
Yeah.
And let me go over here because there's a second part to this that I think is kind of interesting. And that is if we take a look here, share, and this should bring up a frequency chart here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to see this. So these are ranking in order. And number one is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's used 10% of the time. 1, 1, 1, 1, 6% of the time.
Yeah.
And they go through here with analysis. It's pretty detailed. There's a lot of advertisements here. And then we've got the pattern 2580, right? Going up
Right.
and down on the keyboard.
Yep.
This is in position number 22.
Yeah.
And you got some like 1111, 69, 69. That shows up there pretty high.
Yeah.
And then if you come along here, I'm not going to go through all this, but then you've got the bottom end, if you will. And here we have the least popular is 8068. So, I almost thought when I first looked at that, it was an 8088 or 8086,
Yeah.
those numbers for the chips. But kind of interesting what's not being used. And it's more curious to me, why aren't these being used?
Just harder to remember, harder to reach with your fingers or something like that.
Yeah, but something like 9988,
Yeah.
9985. This goes with forensic, um, what do we call that? Forensic, uh, forensic auditing. I know you're familiar with this, where there's a higher frequency when you're auditing bank accounts.
That's right.
That years ago, somebody found that the number 1 should come up more often in somebody's bank account than the number 9.
That's right.
Yeah, so the lower numbers. And interesting, I'm just quick observation, same thing here. We've got all the 99s
Yeah.
that are in the top, or I guess the bottom, however you want to phrase that, the least used.
Yep. That's more natural. It makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And on the keyboard, 9, and where would it be on the phone? I'm just looking here. 9. Interesting. Fun for food, fun for talk, food for fun, I guess.
Well, I was
Food for
listening to
thought.
Steve's podcast and they explained how to switch to an alphabetical pin, and I did that. And that's, of course, the next step forward. So now my pin is a word instead of numbers.
So it could be W-O.
No, but the
R.
iPad will actually switch to a full alphabetic keyboard.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it's in the settings. And by the way, when you do it and then you forget it, which I did, you still have 72 hours to get in with your old pin to help you remember.
Oh, this is to get into the iPad.
Yeah, well, they get into iPhone, you can set it to alphabetic, and then it puts the whole alphabet up there, and now you can use a word.
Oh, I
That's what I
see.
did.
What about the,
Because of Caitlin. Caitlin keeps hacking into my iPhone.
there we go. So what about the swipe?
I haven't
You-
tried it. I
I
know,
haven't tried it either.
yeah, but that's another option.
All right. So that's it for me, Sam. Anything else for you?
That's it for me too, and we'll have another one of these on Tuesday.
And can we have a nice laugh to go out?
I don't know.
Guess not. We
Yeah.
tried.
All right, I'm stopping it.